Queen Daenerys Targaryen acts as a pure agent of change in Essos in A Song of Ice and Fire. She has cut a path through Slaver's Bay, removing the barbaric practice for which that reason was named, and her changes have caused her to gain many enemies. If we go back to the beginning of the series, we see attempts made on her life by Robert and by Varys for nothing that she has done in particular. She is viewed as having the wrong last name and potentially being a threat due to who her husband is. Whereas in the series present, we see her taking action on her own that threatens the status quo of many of the nobility who have profited off of this terrible practice of slavery in Essos. And we see in her second to last chapter in the published A Song of Ice and Fire series as of this year, 2025, and another attempt is made on her life, but this time by an unknown party, though by a similar means to those in the past. Today, I want to go into who attempted to poison Daenerys Targaryen in the second to last chapter of her arc in A Dance with Dragons. To set the scene a little bit, Daenerys' arc in A Dance with Dragons is all about dealing with Meereen as a whole. I'm working on a larger video on her arc and breaking it down and the themes that are at play in it, but Cliff Notes' version of that is that she's trying to create lasting change. The cities that she'd previously conquered in Essos and removed slavery in, they've fallen back to their old ways or butchery fairly quickly, as she didn't leave any structured regimes in place to actually reinforce her changes she's making to the systems of society in each of these civilizations. So she's trying to stay in Meereen and rule, and part of ruling in Meereen is her trying to forge this peace with the masters that had previously ruled over this city. That peace is something that she works at and works at and works out throughout the entire book before eventually getting married to Hizdahr Zalorak and reopening the fighting pits of Meereen as a symbolic gesture that the culture of the city is being honored, despite the fact that she's removed the practice of slavery upon which this city had really relied previously. This assassination attempt happens at the reopening of the fighting pits. Daenerys 9, A Dance with Dragons, she is escorted to this grand royal box to see the opening fights at the pit. There are a number of individuals in the box, most notably Daenerys, Hizdahr Zalorak, her husband, and a number of other individuals who are around her, part of her court, protecting her. But soon, this scene descends into chaos. Something similar happens in the show. There are a few notable changes, most notably Tyrion is not part of this at this point. He's actually performing in the pit rather than being a part of Daenerys' retainers at this point. And additionally, the Sons of the Harpy don't just pop up with knives and start stabbing people. Instead, Hizdahr, Daenerys' husband, king, quote-unquote, of Meereen, offers her a bowl of locusts, which end up being poisoned. He really wants her to eat them. Strong Belwas, one of her retainers in Queensguard, who's traveled with Barristan Selmy, ends up eating all of them instead. And as these fights go on, we begin to hear that Belwas is feeling ill and something is going on. And then, by the time Drogon descends and Daenerys flies off, to add to the chaos of this scene already, Belwas is kind of vomiting blood and bile, and it's not great. We hear that Belwas survives this poisoning, but he only does so because he is so massive and so strong. He invested very heavily in Constitution. Pretty much anybody else probably would have died from this. This begs the question, who poisoned the locusts? We see a conclusion reached in the main series by one of our viewpoint characters. Specifically, Sir Barristan Selmy becomes a viewpoint in the aftermath of these events in the pits, and given Daenerys' absence, is forced to navigate the political fallout of this situation on his own, which he's really not good at doing, but he considers a number of candidates for the potential poisoner role. Quentyn Martell is considered, given that his uncle Oberyn was big on poisons. He doesn't like Daario, so Daario is thrown in there, but eventually he is set on the right track by the Shave Pate, who points out that these poisoned locusts were offered to Daenerys by her husband Hizdahr. Hizdahr could have been trying to kill Daenerys, and as such, he could have gained power in Meereen and really brought the city back to what it had been. And because of this, Barristan ends up doing a coup and taking Hizdahr out of power on the suspicion that this was his doing. It's also worth noting the Shave Pate brings further evidence, quote unquote, that Hizdahr's confectioner was the one who actually made and poisoned the locust, but it's worth noting that this is just going on the Shave Pate's word. You might have been able to tell from my tone, but I do not think that Hisdar poisoned the locusts, and I think there are a number of reasons as to why this is the case. First and foremost, we see that because of suspicion that he did poison the locusts, he gets cooed almost immediately. I think at this point, Hisdar would not want to kill Daenerys because I don't think he is a strong enough ruler to actually maintain control of his kingship on his own. He is only a king because he married Daenerys and because she lifted him up and tried to kind of create this alliance with those individuals in Meereen. And her rule is founded on this strength that she brings to the table, her army of Unsullied, her Queensguard, her dragons, most importantly. If Hisdar poisons Daenerys, or if Daenerys dies for some reason, all of that goes away. Daenerys flying away is not dissimilar to her dying, but overall, it's kind of different in that she could come back, so all of these systems do remain in place and do reinforce Hisdar's rule. I think Hisdar is a terrible person who would kill Daenerys, but I don't think he would do that yet because his rule is not yet very solidified. Additionally, if he was the one trying to poison Daenerys, he did it in pretty much the dumbest way possible, as he is very clearly suspected by everyone who thinks about this event. He was the one who was offering Daenerys these locusts, and think about it, if we're looking at the poison itself, we've seen poison in Ice and Fire designed to create this suspicion that, oh, maybe someone died of natural causes. The Tears of Lys, which were used on Jon Arryn before the first book. We have the Strangler, which was used on Joffrey in A Storm of Swords. Both of these could very convincingly be passed off as someone dying it naturally. If we look at Belwas and his symptoms, he was vomiting blood and bile. It doesn't sound like this was a slow-acting or subtle poison that would have really created anything but suspicion of this being directly a poisoning rather than any natural causes. Hisdar being the one to directly offer her these locusts and then it being such an obvious type of poison doesn't really track for me as the plot of someone who's actually trying to kill Daenerys. It sounds more like someone is trying to set Hisdar up as killing Daenerys. Before getting into my main suspect, it's worth noting that in an earlier draft of this story, back when Daenerys 9 was supposed to be her second chapter in A Dance with Dragons, these locusts were not poisoned. Belwas still got sick, but it seems like it was just hot girl tummy issues, and it wasn't any impetus that would actually lead to an assassination attempt or suspicion thereof. So it is possible that is also the case in the main series, and Barristan is just fully being misled, but overall I do think there seems to be some poison given that Belwas is described as being near death and having lost a lot of weight in its aftermath. I think the individual who fits the most for potentially poisoning the locusts is Skahaz Mo Kandak, aka the Shave Pate. You might be confused, he's a character who I barely noticed on my first read, which maybe speaks to my level of care for Meereen on my first read. It has since grown on me a lot, but overall, he is the character who stands to benefit the most from the shattering of this peace Daenerys has forged in Meereen. We see him kind of come into his own as one of Daenerys' advisors throughout A Dance with Dragons. He's effectively her master of whisperers. She puts him in charge of getting information on the Sons of the Harpy. He ends up trying to torture it out of people, potentially using their children against them, and he continually advocates for the murder of her child hostages. The Shadebait is a quite interesting character. Martin describes him as the Littlefinger of Meereen, which makes me like him even more. Not because I like Littlefinger, but because Littlefinger is an interesting character. But regardless of that, he is someone who is idealistically absolutely correct, given that he is cutting against all of these old institutions of Meereen, slavery, the things he had previously benefited from, as he was a Meereenese noble before shaving his head and embracing the role of someone who is changing the status quo in this revolution. But the key to the Shave Pate is the fact that he's kind of going about it in exactly the wrong ways, given the fact that he is continually advocating for the death of child hostages and trying to just kind of create this change through just fully wiping out all individuals who don't fully stand for Daenerys' mission, which in theory is good, but it is not creating lasting change as Daenerys is trying to do here. I think that descriptor that Martin had of Skahaz, the shave pate being the Littlefinger of Meereen, is quite telling, as Littlefinger is entirely self-interested, and I believe that the shave pate is the same way, as he was cast out of power very recently. This peace deal that Daenerys reached with Hisdar and the Old Nobility resulted in the shave pate effectively being removed from Daenerys' circle for being too extreme, and beyond that, he was removed from control of the Brazen Beasts, which are this like city watch-like organization that he had previously commanded. And at this point, it would make sense that he wants to create further chaos, as Littlefinger would want to do, to get back into power. As while this peace deal isn't good and very much results in Daenerys making compromises with bad actors that she shouldn't, there are elements of it that are positive, in like the Sons of the Harpy not murdering people anymore, and Daenerys not having to murder 100 children to secure her peace. Another reason I think it is the shave pate is the fact that this poison effectively could have had no target and he still would have been successful. Anyone in the box being poisoned by these locusts would likely result in the peace in Meereen shattering. Hell, the current situation kind of shows that, because Daenerys wasn't poisoned, Strong Belwas was poisoned, and yet Daenerys' peace that she works this entire book to achieve is still shattered. So at this point, I think it very much shows that no matter who it was, something was going to come of it that benefits the Shave Pate, because we're able to see him spin this into getting control of the Brazen Beasts again, and then ruling Meereen alongside Barristan at the end of A Dance with Dragons and into the Winds of Winter. I think this will likely result in him kind of consolidating power and maybe even turning on Barristan, claiming the city for himself and executing anyone who disagrees with him, like Hisdar or the child hostages. Hisdar, at least, I'm okay with being executed. But regardless of that, I think it very much shows that this very visible poison is used to create further chaos and just blow up the peace entirely. I think the key to all of this is Barristan's arc as well. I don't think that it serves Barristan's arc for him to have been exactly correct about what he has been told, with the poisoner being Hisdar and him doing an entirely just thing for entirely the right reasons. The key to this for me is that Barristan is doing the right thing. The peace is bad. Hisdar is bad. Hisdar should be removed from power because he's doing bad things. But ultimately, the peace is protecting people in Meereen, and especially without Daenerys, it's going to create a chaotic situation that results in bad actors coming to power and a lot of further bloodshed, including of innocents and potentially of Barristan himself. There's a very poignant quote from one of his first chapters, the Queensguard. He did not like the taste of this. It smelled of deceit, of whispers and lies and plots hatched in the dark, all the things he'd hoped to leave behind in the Spider and Lord Littlefinger and their ilk. Barristan Selmy was not a bookish man, but he'd often glanced through the pages of the White Book, where the deeds of his predecessors has been recorded. Some had been heroes, some weaklings, knaves, or cravens. Most were only men, quicker and stronger than most, more skilled with a sword and shield, but still prey to pride, ambition, lust, love, anger, jealousy, greed for gold, hunger for power, and all the other failings that afflicted lesser mortals. The best of them overcame their flaws, did their duty, and died with swords in their hands. The worst, the worst were those who played the Game of Thrones. Barristan has that thought and then immediately starts playing the Game of Thrones. So I think that it is fairly telling, and I do think that Martin is correct in the worst knights being the ones that play the Game of Thrones, as we see the framing of individuals like Kristen Cole and Jaime Lannister, these individuals who did have more political dealings by either raising one king up or casting another down, painted as the worst of the worst amongst Kingsguard, and we see Barristan doing exactly that, despite it being for a noble reason. This is a fairly ambiguous plot, and it's one that I'm not sure we will get a concrete answer to at any future point in the series. It's worth noting there is a very in-depth essay going into Daenerys' arc in A Dance with Dragons. It's called The Myronese Blot. I would recommend reading it. They also hypothesized that the Shave Pate was the one to poison the locusts. I would enjoy it. I link it in the description, but I will also say there are elements of the later parts of it that getting into kind of Mad Queen Daenerys territory that I really don't super agree with. But regardless of that, Martin has commented on that essay specifically and said they kind of got it, which did make me think that, yeah, maybe the locusts were poisoned by the shave pate. There are other candidates who could work quite well. The wise masters of Yunkai have always been in my head for a potential candidate who could have wanted Daenerys dead, but I struggle with finding a concrete agent in the city or someone who would really have any evidence against them beyond the shave pate or Hisdar for doing this crime. So it is an interesting issue and a fairly ambiguous one. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and it does really help grow the channel. I have many more videos for you in the future, so I hope you'll stick around for those on A Song of Ice and Fire, House of the Dragon, Dunk and Egg. There's something I'm forgetting. Game of Thrones. It's a good show for the first 4 seasons at least. I would recommend it for those 4 seasons. And yeah, I appreciate it. Subscribe, like. I have a Patreon. Comment. You can do that too. I'll be at New York Comic Con in about a month's time, so I hope I will see some of you there. That'll be fun. I've never been to a convention before, so yeah. Goodbye, everybody.